Christians, the Jews and the Muslims considered Jerusalem in the Holy Land of Palestine to be a holy city. Every religion has its own reason for claiming the city to be holy for them. For the Christians, Jesus was crucified here, he rose from the dead and ascended into heaven from Jerusalem. For the Jews, the land is holy because it was given to Abraham by God. The Muslims claim the city to be holy because it was given to Abraham by God and because it was from this city that Prophet Muhammad ascended into heaven to meet Allah. In 600 AD, the Muslims of Arab conquered the city of Jerusalem and took complete control of the place, including the churches and all pilgrim places. They put a law in place whereby Christians were allowed to reside in the city if they paid an extra tax known as jizya or poll tax. The Arabs were tolerant of the Christians and Jews in the city, but they were not considered to be of equal status as the Muslims, which often barred them from a number of activities. Every caliph had their own rules, and while some were stricter, others were more tolerant. Around 1095, the city of Jerusalem fell into the hands of a new group of Muslims known as the Seljuk Turks. They massacred many Christians and barred them from entering the holy city for pilgrimage. Most of the churches were destroyed and many were turned into stables. The Seljuk tribes were very stern followers of Islam and did not tolerate any other religion. The Christians wanted to rescue their holy land from the Muslims and revive pilgrimages which had come to an abrupt end because of the Seljuk Turks. The limited access of their own pilgrim place in the years during the rule of the Arabs and the eventual barring of Christians from Jerusalem had stirred the hearts and souls of many Christians who wanted to fight for their holy land and reclaim it. The Turks did not stop at Jerusalem. They continued their conquests further west and headed to Constantinople, which was the capital city of the Byzantine Empire. The Greek emperor realized the threat this posed and sent urgent letters to Pope Urban II, who was the pope at that time. He asked the pope for help, stating how the imminent threat from the Turks could end up in the destruction of all the holy relics in the city. Pope Urban II immediately held a great council at the Church of Palsentia in Italy in 1095. However, the council was not able to come to a conclusive decision of helping Constantinople. Later that year, a new council was held at Clermont, France. Pope Urban is able to succeed at igniting the spirit of Crusades in the attendees of the council. The Crusades was led primarily to help the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos to save his empire from the invading Seljuk Turks. But the underlying objective of the Crusades was to recapture the sacred city of Jerusalem and the Holy Land so that the Christians in the region can be free once again and pilgrims can return to the Holy Land. From the 1st to the 9th, the course of the Crusades. The Crusades officially began on August 15, 1096, but there were hordes of French and German peasants who had started the Crusades way before the official date. These Crusades was known as the People's Crusades, where undisciplined people with little or no knowledge about battles had declared war against the Turks. The People's Crusade is considered to be a prelude to the actual Crusade. It lasted for about 6 months, starting April 1096. The People's Crusades was not organized officially by the Catholic Church. While Pope Urban II had decided the date for the departure of the Crusades to be August 16, 1096, many peasants and knights decided to leave for Jerusalem on their own to set the Holy Land free. The peasants were afflicted by drought and famine for many years, and many meteorological occurrences in the early 1095, which included a meteor shower, aurorae, a lunar eclipse, and a comet, made the people believe that the world was about to end. The unorganized bands of peasants and low-ranking knights were led by Peter the Hermit of Amiens. He preached the crusade in most of northern France and Flanders, which led to an overwhelming response for the crusade, reaching almost 100,000 crusaders, which mainly consisted of unskilled fighters. Some minor knights joined the People's Crusade as well. One such knight who led the People's Crusade was Walter Sans of Goire. They were able to reach as far as the edge of Nicaea, which was a Seljuk stronghold and provincial capital. The Turkish army was waiting for the Crusaders to march further. They were waiting at the wooded valley near the village of Drakon. This was about 3 miles from the Crusaders' camp. When the Crusaders marched ahead, the Turks showered a hail of arrows, creating panic among the Crusaders. They quickly rushed to their camp, but many lives were lost and only 3,000 Crusaders were able to finally take refuge in an abandoned castle. The Crusaders were saved when the Byzantines sailed over and attacked the Turks, raising the siege. The First Crusade. The main Crusades began when 4 Crusader armies left Europe in August 1096 to recapture the Holy Land. Alexios had experienced many incidents during the People's Crusade which made it difficult for him to trust the Crusades who came later. The princes leading the Crusades were carrying less food and water because they expected Alexios to help them. Alexios asked the leaders to swear fealty to him in return for food and water and wanted them to promise that all lands recovered by the Turks which belonged to the Byzantine Empire would be returned to him. Alexios did not show any interest in leading the Crusades. He only wanted the Crusaders to push back the Seljuk Turks, for which he wanted them to go to Asia Minor as quickly as possible. The Crusaders began with the siege of Nicaea, which was under the Sultanate of Kilij Arslan I. Their success in Nicaea soon led to the Battle of Doryalaeum, where Arslan was prepared with bigger troops. But the Crusaders were able to emerge victorious with the help of the French army that arrived in time to join the Crusaders. They further marched to Antioch, where they were able to capture it after the Saxon Crusade arrived on March 4, 1098. The siege at Antioch had started on October the 20th, 1097, and lasted for 8 months, ending on June 28, 1098. They continued further to Jerusalem with lesser resistance from the local rulers. On July 13, 1099, the First Crusaders were finally able to recapture Jerusalem and Godfrey became the leader of the city, but he chose not to wear a crown of gold in the same city where Christ had worn a crown of thorns. The First Crusades had succeeded in their oath and became an inspiration for everyone. The Second Crusades. During the First Crusade, King Baldwin of Boulogne had founded the First Crusade estate, which was known as the County of Edessa. When this county fell into the hands of Islam in 1144, the Catholic Church launched a second major crusade. It was announced by Pope Eugene III and was led by European kings Louis VII of France and Konrad III of Germany. This was the first time that kings had joined the crusade. The Second Crusade, however, was not as successful as the first one. While the main focus of the crusade was recapturing Edessa, King Baldwin III, who succeeded King Baldwin II, shifted the focus of the crusade to capturing Damascus, which was earlier an ally of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The siege of Damascus, however, did not succeed, and the 3 kings leading the siege finally decided to abandon the city of Damascus. The Christian forces which had joined together for the Second Crusade felt betrayed by each other, because of which the crusade was not able to succeed. In 1187, Jerusalem once again returned to the rule of Islam ruler Saladin. He did not just stop at capturing Jerusalem. Saladin spread his forces to conquer other capital cities of the Crusader states, which eventually led to the launch of the Third Crusade. The Third Crusade. It also popularly known as the King's Crusade. The Third Crusade began in 1189 and lasted till 1192. The main objective of this crusade was to reconquer the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Saladin. With the Second Crusade failing at its objectives, the Zengid dynasty controlled Syria and also brought the Egyptian forces under their control. Saladin led these forces to conquer the Christian states and to rule over Jerusalem. The capture of Jerusalem ignited a religious spirit in King Henry of England and King Philip II of France, who ended their personal conflicts to unite as one army and fight against Saladin's forces. King Henry, however, died in 1189, and King Richard I of England succeeded him and continued his alliance with the French king to lead the Third Crusade. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa also decided to unite with the 2 kings and join in their fight for freeing the Holy Land. He marched with a huge army across Anatolia, but he drowned in a river in 1190 before reaching the Holy Land. His successor, Leopold V, Duke of Austria, continued to lead the army, but many troops were grieved by the death of their emperor and returned. The Third Crusade succeeded in recapturing a number of Christian states from Saladin, but Philip and Leopold left soon after the siege of Acre. Philip left 10,000 French crusaders to continue the Third Crusade under Richard, and also left 5,000 silver marks to pay the crusaders. Richard continually held negotiations with Saladin, who did not come in person to meet Richard ever. After a number of conflicts, Saladin finally accepted defeat when Richard defeated Saladin at Jaffa in 1192. He finalized a treaty which allowed unarmed Christian traders and pilgrims to enter the city of Jerusalem, which continued to remain under Muslim control. The Fourth Crusade. Launched by Pope Innocent III, the Fourth Crusade was created to reinstate Christian control of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. It was a Western European armed expedition. When the Crusades were on their way to Jerusalem in January 1203, they entered into an agreement with Byzantine Prince Alexios Angelos that they would help that his father, who was overthrown from his seat as the emperor in Constantinople, regains his throne. The Crusades would then continue towards the Holy Land with financial and military assistance from the Byzantine Empire. In June 1203, the Crusaders reached Constantinople, and in August 1203, Alexios Angelos was crowned co-emperor with the help of the Crusaders. But he was soon deposed, and the Crusade did not get any of the financial or military support that they expected. The Western Crusades finally decided to conquer Constantinople when Alexios was murdered on February 8, 1204. They were able to successfully capture the city in April 1204 and started a new Latin empire. The Crusade failed to achieve what it was intended for. The Byzantine Empire suffered irreparably from this conquest. It also led to a deepening of the schism between the East and West churches. The Fifth Crusade. Pope Innocent II and his successor Pope Honorius III had organized crusaders who were led by King Andrew II of Hungary and Leopold VI, Duke of Austria. Like the previous crusades, this crusade also intended to recapture the city of Jerusalem and the rest of the Holy Land. The Fifth Crusade aimed at first conquering the state of Ayyubid in Egypt, which was the most powerful state in the region. It lasted from 1213 to 1221. They were joined by John of Brienne, who was the ruler of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Prince Bohemond IV of Antioch, and Hugh I of Cyprus. In October 1217, the leaders held a war council in Acre, and soon the Crusaders defeated Muslim forces at Bethsaida on River Jordan. In 1221, King Andrew II fell sick and he decided to return to Hungary with his army. Prince Bohemond and Hugh I also returned to their homelands at the same time. Leopold and John were joined by Oliver of Cologne and his German army, and the Count of Holland William I, who came with an army as well. They decided to attack Damietta in Egypt. The siege failed poorly, and the Crusaders lost lives to diseases, and while Damietta was eventually captured, part of the Crusaders had left for their homes, and those who were left headed towards Cairo, led by John of Brienne. With food and water supplies coming to an end, the Crusaders decided to return, but it was too late because they were attacked by the forces of Al-Kamil, who killed many and had the rest surrender. In order to release the Crusaders, Al-Kamil decided on the terms that Damietta will be returned to him. An 8-year peace agreement was made with Europe. Al-Kamil had also promised a piece of the True Cross, but he never gave it because he never had it. The Sixth Crusade. 7 years after the last crusade failed in its attempt to regain control over Jerusalem, the Sixth Crusade was announced. It started in 1228 and lasted for just a year. The Kingdom of Jerusalem had started regaining its control over Jerusalem and other parts of the Holy Land, which was in Muslim control. This was possible because of the diplomacy of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. Frederick II had played a role in bringing together the troops for the last crusade, but he did not go with the army. He was crowned emperor in 1220 and married Yolande of Jerusalem in 1225. She was the daughter of John of Brienne, who was the ruler of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. With his claim on Jerusalem being stronger, he had more reason to recapture it now. He left with his army from Brindisi, Italy, to Acre, which was the capital of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, in 1227. He had to return unexpectedly when an epidemic broke in the region. Gregory II, who was the Pope at the time, excommunicated him for breaking his Crusader vow. Frederick once again sailed to Syria with his army in 1228. From there, he sailed to Cyprus and then reached Jerusalem. While he was greeted by the barons of the places he went to, rumours about his excommunication spread quickly and made it difficult for him to gain the trust of other barons. His forces were not enough to attack Al-Kamil and the Ayyubid army, so he decided on diplomacy. He requested for negotiation, and Al-Kamil, who was dealing with rebellion in Syria, agreed to relinquish Jerusalem along with other cities along a narrow corridor to the coast. These included Nazareth, Jaffa, Sidon and Bethlehem. The terms of negotiation provided control of the Temple Mount area, Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of Rock and the Transjordan castles to the Muslims. Jews were prohibited from living in Jerusalem. The treaty was completed on February 18, 1229, and it provided a 10-year truce. It is often referred as the Treaty of Jaffa and Tel Ajul. On 17 March 1229, Frederick was crowned King of Jerusalem. He had proved that a crusade could succeed without papal involvement and without extensive military superiority. The Seventh Crusade. The Seventh Crusade began when the Khwarezmians captured Jerusalem in 1244, putting the city back in Muslim control. Most kings were occupied in their own conflicts at this time, and the only king who decided to take up the cross and march crusaders to recapture Jerusalem was King Louis IX of France. He planned carefully for the crusade by collecting an ecclesiastical tithe. In 1248 he had an army of 15,000, with which he sailed to Cyprus first, and from there he went to Damietta. He reached Damietta in 1249 and captured it with very less difficulties. He marched towards Cairo, but his army was defeated and he was eventually taken captive. He was released for a ransom of 800,000 peasants, and Damietta was surrendered to the Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt. He went to Acre, where he started rebuilding cities which belonged to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and later returned to France. The crusade was a failure, and King Louis IX realized that he had spent a huge amount from the treasury in a failed crusade. While the Seventh Crusade failed, King Louis IX's fame grew among his people, and he became stronger than the Holy Roman Emperor. The Eighth Crusade. Even though the last crusade had failed, King Louis IX continued to support the settlements in Outremer financially and militarily from 1254 to 1266. He then decided to take up the cross once again and informed Pope Clement IV of his intentions. He officially announced his next crusade on March 24, 1267. The Crusaders were set to sail in early summer 1270 and planned to go to the coast of Outremer, but plans changed, and it was decided that the ships would sail to Tunis. This change took place because Louis's brother, Charles of Anjou, had recently captured the Kingdom of Sicily, and it was thought that they would benefit from a revival of the traditional influence of Sicily over Tunis. On the king's arrival in Tunis, an epidemic swept the region, killing most of the Crusaders. The king also lost his life just before his brother Charles could arrive. The crusade failed because of the disease, and the siege of Tunis was abandoned. The Sultan of Tunis reached an agreement to allow free trade for the Christians with Tunis and to provide residence for the monks and priests. Prince Edward of England arrived with his fleet of Crusaders just the day before the Crusaders were leaving Tunis. They returned together to Sicily. The Ninth Crusade. The Eighth and the Ninth Crusade are often grouped as one. It is the last major crusade. It started in 1271 and ended in 1272. In the last crusade, Louis IX of France had failed in his objective of capturing Tunis. Edward had arrived too late to Tunis. He returned with the rest of the French army to Sicily, and from there he decided to sail to Acre with his army of 1,000 men, which included 225 knights. He was accompanied by Louis's brother Charles of Anjou. When they arrived at Acre, Baibars, who was a sultan, had besieged many Crusader territories. At the time of the arrival, Tripoli, which was the last of the territories in the county of Tripoli, was under siege. It had a huge number of Christians who had sought refuge in the region. Edward's army was too small to fight with Baibars and his army in open battle, so they conducted small raids. In of their raids, Edward was able to take Nazareth. He also tried to form a Franco-Mongol alliance, for which he sent an embassy to the Mongol ruler of Persia, Abaka. He was also an enemy of the Mongols, and he agreed to the alliance. Abaka sent 10,000 horsemen under the leadership of General Samagar. The Mongols successfully pushed the Muslims as far south as Cairo. However, they did not stay. When Baibars and his army launched a counter-offensive attack in November 1271, the Mongols had already left and had gone beyond the Euphrates. The arrival of King Hai III of Cyprus with his army under the command of Edward's brother Edmund instilled more confidence in Edward, and he was able to launch bigger raids. In December 1271, Edward, along with his troops, repelled an attack by Baibars on the city of Acre. Eventually, Baibars decided to abandon the siege of Tripoli and retreat. Edward decided that it was important that the Christian states were in harmony with each other so that they could fight the Muslims together. For this, he mediated between Hugh III of Cyprus and the Knights of the Ibelin family of Cyprus. He also arranged for a 10-year, 10-month and 10-day agreement between Hugh III and Baibars in May 1272 in Caesarea. Edmund left for England the following month, while Edward decided to stay for longer to ensure that the agreement is honoured. When an assassin tried to kill him, Edward ended up killing the assassin, but was wounded during the attack. The wound was from a poison dagger. This delayed his departure to England. In September 1272, he sailed to Sicily. At Sicily, he first received the death of his son John, and a few months later he came to know that his father died too. In 1273, Edward set sail for his home. He reached England in the middle of 1274 and was crowned the king on August 1274. The Mamluks, who had claimed most of the Holy Land, started asking for higher tributes, and the persecution of the pilgrims once again started to increase during the period of the truce. In 1289, Mamluk Sultan Qalwun finally conquered Tripoli. The attack led to huge losses on both sides. Qalawun decided to wait for the next 2 years and regather his strength. In 1291, a pilgrim group in Acre was attacked. The Christians retailed by killing 19 Muslim merchants in a Syrian caravan. Qalawun demanded a huge amount in compensation, and when he did not receive any response, he decided to besiege Acre. At that time, Acre was the only independent Crusader state in the Holy Land. He died before the siege was over. His successor, Khalil, was the last surviving member of his family. Acre was lost to the Mamluks, and Cyprus was the only Crusader state left. In 1299, Ghazan Khan led his Mongol army against the Mamluks. He withdrew from Syria in 1300 after leading many successful campaigns against the Mamluks. A second set of attacks against the Mamluks were conducted by the Mongols along with the Armenian kingdom of Cilicia, but they were defeated in 1303. The last Crusader fortress on the Holy Land, Ruad Island, was finally taken by the Mamluks. This marked an end to the Crusades, which had lasted for 208 years. Military orders in the Crusades. Most of the Crusades used Western European customs when it came to warfare. Orders and ranks did not see many innovations except 3 military orders. These were the Knights Hospitaller, the Knights Templar, and the Teutonic Knights. While the Knights Hospitaller existed before the First Crusade, the other 2 military orders had been created during the Crusades. Knights Hospitaller. The Knights Hospitaller are the order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem. They are also known as the Order of St. John, Order of Hospitallers and Knights Hospitalaries. In 1023, Italian merchants saw the approval of Caliph Ali al-Zahir to rebuild a hospital that was earlier destroyed by Caliph al-Hakim bi Amr Allah. The hospital was built on the site of the monastery of St. John the Baptist. It was built to retreat and care for the Christian pilgrims visiting the holy sites. The order was found to mainly care for the pilgrims in Jerusalem, but following the First Crusade, the order quickly expanded its role to provide the pilgrims with armed escort. Gerard Thom had founded the order, and he was succeeded in 1118 by Raymond Dupois. Raymond organized a militia from the order. He divided them into knights, men-at-arms and chaplain. The troops of the order joined Baldwin in the First Crusade. Since then, the Knights Hospitaller have been considered a part of the Crusades as a military order. The order was identified by their special dress, which was approved by Pope Innocent IV in 1248. When the Kingdom of Jerusalem was mainly under the control of the Christians, the Knights held many great forts and estates in the region. The two primary bases of power of the Knights Hospitaller were Crac de Chevalier and Margat in Syria. They gained a lot of recognition in England, where many nobles donated land to the order. The fall of the Kingdom of Jerusalem was a big blow to the Knights. They were limited mainly to the county of Tripoli, and once Acre was captured in 1291, the order took refuge in the Kingdom of Cyprus. Since they did not want to be caught in the political upheaval in Cyprus, the Knights decided to acquire their own domain by choosing the city of Rhodes as their base. After 4 years of campaigning under their leader, Fouque de Villaret, in August 1310, Rhodes finally surrendered to the Knights. However, Rhodes did not become a permanent home for the Knights because they were soon displaced by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent in 1522. The Knights showed valour and fought bravely, but the Sultan had a large army which eventually defeated the Knights. These Hospitallers were allowed to withdraw to Sicily. After 7 years of trying to find a base and moving from one city to another in Europe, the Hospitallers were able to find fixed quarters when Charles I of Spain and King of Sicily gave them Gozo, Malta and North African region of Tripoli. The Hospitallers continued fighting against Muslims and Barbary pirates. By the 16th century, the Crusades had completely died and European sponsors began to dwindle as the Hospitallers were no longer needed for the first reason the order was formed, to support the Crusades. So they decided to police the Mediterranean from the pirates. As their income reduced and the exchange rate of the local currency soon rendered the currency outdated, the Knights Hospitaller ended up plundering Muslim ships to survive. The plunderings became more common, and soon the Hospitallers were able to live a luxurious life, taking local women as their wives. Many of them started enrolling in foreign navies. This period saw a decline in the morals of the Knights, many of whom decided to serve the Kingdom of France, which was in amicable terms with the Ottoman Empire, the sworn enemies of the Hospitallers. The Knights in Malta were also earning a considerable amount of profit by policing the Mediterranean and seizing ships and cargoes that they considered infidel. The Knights transformed Malta into a flourishing island. After Napoleon captured Malta in 1798, the Hospitallers settled in Rome in 1834 and took up hospital work once again. They still have presence in 120 countries around the world and is dedicated to the care of the poor, sick, elderly, disabled and homeless. Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, also known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, was found in 1119 and was active between 1129 and 1312. With the First Crusade having successfully captured many parts of the Holy Land and to have gained secure passage for pilgrims to Jerusalem, many Christians started returning to Jerusalem as pilgrims. But while Jerusalem was secure, the outer regions continued to be a difficult journey. So in 1119, French knight Hugues de Payens requested King Baldwin I to consider the creation of a monastic order to protect the pilgrims visiting Jerusalem. It was approved in 1120 and the newly formed order was provided a wing of the royal palace in the Temple Mount in the Al-Aqsa Mosque as their headquarters. It was believed that Temple Mount was built on the ruins of the Temple of Solomon, which was why the knights took the name of the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. While they did not enjoy huge incomes earlier, the knights soon became a favoured charity in Christians, and Pope Innocent II exempted the knights from having to obey the local laws. This gave the knights the ability to roam freely in the regions, and their income increased because of their fame. They were considered an elite military order which would help Crusades in winning many battles by going ahead of the rest of the army and breaking enemy lines. While their military missions were handled by the main combatants of the order, there were those who managed the financial infrastructure too. The Knights Templar created an early form of banking where those who wanted to participate in Crusades would place all their assets under the Templars. Similarly, people who wanted to go on a pilgrimage would deposit their valuables with the Templars and get a document for the value of the deposit. They could then travel without valuables and reach the Holy Land, where they could show the document to another Templar in the city and gain valuables of an equal amount. This made travelling safe and helped Templars finance their ventures too. This helped the Templars improve their financial healthiness and gave them the opportunity to build massive stone cathedrals and castles. But the Knights lost their importance as Jerusalem was recaptured. They were a part of many unsuccessful campaigns. During the Sixth Crusade in 1229, Frederick II had been able to reclaim the city of Jerusalem without the help of the Templars. By 1303, when all main footholds of the order had been captured by the Mamluks, the need of the order had died. Crusades had ended by this time as well. The Templars' main motive of providing military support and protection to the pilgrims had ended. They continued many other businesses. The order was eventually disbanded in 1312 by Pope Clement. Teutonic Knights. The Teutonic Knights were also known as the Order of the Brothers of the German House of St. Mary in Jerusalem. It was founded in 1190 in Acre. The order has its presence till this day. It was formed to control the port tolls of Acre and to safeguard the Christians in the area. They moved their base to Transylvania in 1211. They were displaced again by King Andrew II of Hungary in 1225. In 1230, they claimed Chelmno land as their own, which belonged to the Polish prince. They gradually took over many other Prussian territories. The Teutonic Knights were considered to be financially strong, and they had also proved themselves to be a powerful naval power in the Baltic Sea region. The knights wore white surcoats which had a black cross on it. In the end, the Crusades had failed to accomplish the goal of recapturing Jerusalem and the Holy Land. While every single one of the Crusades did not count as a failure, as many achieved success in bringing part of the Holy Land back to the Christians, not a single Crusader army was able to capture Jerusalem. Peace was brought in the land only through the means of a truce or agreements. Eventually, people started losing enthusiasm of participating in the crusade, and towards the end, the Crusaders were no longer as zealous about their objectives as the first army of Crusaders. With the Dark Ages coming to an end, religion was no longer considered primary in the lives of people. Neither did the Crusaders regain the Holy Land from the Turkish Muslims, nor were they able to keep the Muslims away or convert them into Christianity. Many wars were lost and blood was shed incessantly through the period of the Crusades. People had started realizing that the loss of lives could only do their country harm, and so when the Pope decided to launch a 10th Crusade, they did not receive the expected response, and so did not proceed with it. A social transformation took place because of the Crusades. Holy warfare, which showcased the strength of Christians to suffer violence in the name of religion, made many people choose Christianity because of the devoutness of the Christians. The Europeans also traded extensively with Middle Eastern traders. The exchanges of goods and ideas helped create a thriving marketplace. New foods and clothing materials were introduced to the Europeans and the Muslims alike. The monarch also gained higher power during the period of the Crusades as they decided to take up the cross and lead many crusades. Both Europeans and Muslims came to know about new military techniques which strengthened their overall military expertise. However, one of the biggest problems was the taxes that were levied on the people for funding the Crusades. The loss of religious property on both sides attached a sentimental reason for fighting in the wars. Between a fight of the Muslims and Christians, the Jews suffered severely as well. By the end of the Sixth Crusade, Jews were once again prohibited to live in Jerusalem. Many synagogues and holy books were also destroyed by the Crusaders. Between 1095, when the Crusades began, and 1291, when the Ninth Crusade ended, the world changed. It transformed the outlook of people related to religion, war and monarchy. A number of changes took place in this time, and while the Crusades never achieved their primary objective, the Crusaders were often praised for their works.